first of all, I would like to say, since it's an observation for Veterans Day, I would like to thank all the veterans who have currently or have served our country. Wish you a happy Veterans Day. My son, Brian, his Sergeant Brian John McLaren. He was the 3rd Special Forces for the Army. 5 years ago on Father's Day, he was in a diving accident here in California while on vacation with his fiance. He dove in the water down at the Big Sur, hit his head on a rock. They got him out of the water, and the lack of blood and oxygen to the brain, where it severed from his spine, his brainstem, caused a massive stroke. They carefully flew him from there to Santa Clara and put him on life support. Once he was declared legally brain dead, they started looking for organ recipients because he was a registered organ donor. So 2 days later, on June 20th, 2007, 5 people received his 7 organs in transplant surgeries. So I moved out to California a few months later and joined California Transplant Donor Network as an ambassador to educate the public what it means to be a tissue and organ donor. And Brian, on the bottom of here, are 3 of his 5 recipients who I've personally met, and they're wonderful men. Do you want me to tell you?
Yes, please.
Jerry here received Brian's heart. Bjorn received Brian's kidney, and Eddie received the kidney transplant. Eddie was on dialysis 5 days a week and doing 4 insulin shots a day. Bjorn was just a diabetic doing insulin. Jerry was in the hospital and had a machine in his chest, and they told him that they had finally found a donor. Took him to the surgery, and he woke up with the machine still in his chest. He's like, well, what happened? And they said not all the organs that when they remove them are good. So they said that the heart was no good, so they had to put him back on the machine and put him back on the transplant list. They basically gave him a week to live, and 3 days later he got my son's heart, and that was 5 years ago. So about a year after I moved here, I wrote letters, and I met Eddie first, then I met Jerry, and so he lives in San Francisco. So I took a trip to meet him, and we walked to a little restaurant, had lunch. He had flowers, and then finally, after about 6 hours of visiting, I got the nerve to say, can I listen to your heartbeat? And he's like, I've been waiting for you to ask me that all day. So I put my head on this side of his chest, and he goes, psst, my heart's on the other side. So we laughed, we cried, and from that day on, we've been the best of friends.
What was it like to hear your son's heart beating in somebody else's chest?
I didn't think of it that way. I just heard a nice, steady, strong beat. And my son was such an outgoing person. He had known fluent Russian, German, and Arabic. He learned those at the Defensive Language School in Monterey. He had traveled to 10 countries. He had just got back from Afghanistan. So I didn't see it as his organ in another person. I just seen it as that gift that Brian helped save someone's life. I didn't make that kind of a connection to it. Maybe that was just weird, but it was just a steady heartbeat. Just was a wonderful impact. It's hard to describe.
When the time came to make that choice, was it difficult for you?
I travel around to high schools, hospitals, health fairs to educate. And the reason why we educate is because, in my case, all my children knew about organ donation, and they were all registered. I did not know about the tissue part of it, because there's 2 aspects to organ donation. There are 8 organs you can donate, which will save a life. And then there is tissue donation will enhance life. So I didn't know about the tissue part, so I didn't donate the cornea of his eyes because I didn't know if it was just the cornea. I didn't donate the skin and the tissues and the bones and stuff like that because I didn't know that. So after he died and I moved out here, I made it my mission to kind of educate so the next person will know about it and they will talk about it with their families. I have a lot of students, they say, I don't know what my mom and dad would do if that happened to me. And I say, well, the best thing to do is to go to them and say, if something were to happen to me, this is what I would like to do. And so through education, we make that connection with their possible donors, with their families. If he wasn't registered, I don't think I could have done it because I was in such a shock and grief. I don't know what I would have done. But he took that out of my hands, and I just honored his wishes.
I noticed that you're wearing dog tags.
Well, yeah, I wear Brian's all the time, and then I have 2 sons also in the Navy. And so, and then I have my brother. He retired from the Army. It's just a strong bond. After Brian's death, he was the first death in our family in like 30 years. So none of my children or nieces and nephews had to deal with death. And I think that's the biggest fear in the public is unless you have lost a loved one who is a donor, or you have a sick person in your family who needs an organ, you don't want to think about death. You don't want, like my son, he was 23 years old. So I have a lot of high school kids, they're like, wow, oh, I'm not going to die for years. Do you know that? You don't know that. And I said, but if that were to happen, what would you do? Would you want your parents to donate your organs? Legally, you can register at 13. But until you're 18, your parents have the final word, say so. But once you're 18, it's like a considered living will. It's a binding contract. So because he took that off our hands, it was much easier for us to do.
Does the family get to decide? He was a donor, so that's kind of like
right. He
a
was
done
23.
deal.
He was done, yeah.
But does the family decide what organs are donated or what can be transplanted?
Yeah. What they normally do when you go to the DMV and you get your driver's license, you can check yes or no whether you want to be an organ donor, and they embed it now, the pink dot, in your license. But you can go on donatelife.org or donatelifecalifornia.org, and when you register, you can decide, like say, your aunt has kidney problems, she's on dialysis. You can put on there that if I'm a match, I would like my kidney to go to my aunt. You can say, I want to donate my organs but not my tissue, or my tissue but not my organs. So you can go there and you can change it and regulate the rules of it, or you can just say, whatever can help someone save a life and create a miracle, then go ahead. So it can be specific or it can be general.
I know that this is probably an odd question, but it's been one raised to me since I've had Mel on the show a few other times, and that is, can someone purchase an organ? Say somebody's waiting to get a heart. Can they give extra money to a hospital or to your organization and have their name bumped up the list?
No. For one, it's illegal. Doctors take an oath and they can lose their license if they got caught dealing with the black market like that. 2, most of the, when you become a donor, you're in a hospital setting. So you're there, you're on life support, you're monitored, and it's controlled. It's a controlled environment. If you're in a car accident and your heart stops, you can't be a donor, organ donor, but you can be a tissue donor for a certain period, for certain, like skin or different things you can do once the heart stopped. But most of the time, you're in a hospital, you're in a controlled environment, you're on life support, you're under the doctor's care, the nurse's watch. So most of the time, that's just a myth. There's so many myths, like, oh, if I'm in a car accident and they see I have the dot on there, they're gonna let me die. Once your heart stops, you can't be a donor. You have to be on life support and declared brain dead. So there's a lot of myths, and through education, we reach the public and we can say, well, yeah, that's what people think, but this is what's really legal and going to happen in that situation.
You travel all over the world talking to people about this. Where are some of the places that you've gone?
Most of I deal with Northern California and Reno area, but last summer I went to the World Transplant Games under the Kidney Foundation, and there I met people from all over the world. There were 50 countries, and all the recipients were people who got organ transplants. So I met a lady from Germany who had double lung transplants, and she was swimming and won a gold medal. And then I met people from I met recipients that never got to see their donor families because in some countries it's against the law. And they just want to hug a donor mom and say thank you. Then next summer, I've been invited to go back as Team USA to South Africa to the World Transplant Games, and I'm really excited about that. So it's just, it happens everywhere in the world. America is just, there's 123,000 people needing organs in the United States. 80% are kidneys. And California is 20% of that 123,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah. And statistics show that like 200,000 people died last year that were candidates to be donors, and only 5% did. So it's a huge part, especially as a donor mom, to use my son's story in such a positive way to educate and say, look, don't be afraid. It could happen, or you might not die in a way where you can be an organ donor. Because I've had people say, my son died in a car accident. Why do I want to be? He couldn't be a donor. Why should I? You don't know how you're going to die, but if your loved one, and I tell people, I'm not here to twist your arm and make you do it, but if your sister needed a kidney or your granddaughter needed a heart, you'd be praying for a miracle. Well, we all have that ability to create miracles for somebody. And so why not? Why not leave a legacy? Brian was a soldier. He fought for our country. He was a hero on the war on terrorists, but he was a hero for humanity because he saved 5 people's lives. What kind of legacy? That's the best legacy to leave, to know he saved those lives. And I met them and their families and their communities. And it's just an amazing feeling to know that you have that ability, I have that ability, everybody has that ability. We just say, check yes to be an organ donor. I mean, there's a country where it's mandatory. You have to check no to not be a donor. It's automatic. But it's the fear of dying, I think, is what stops people and not being educated.
I was going to say, and the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
That's what causes a lot of stumbling blocks for people in many areas of their life, is the fear of the unknown.
And it's the way they were raised. I think the culture today is the more understanding about stuff like this. Even though my son saved 5 people's lives, my mom still says, well, I don't want to be a donor. It's her culture, the way she was raised. And it's okay. It's okay to not want to do it, but you can be saving somebody's life, It's just your personal choice.
Tell me your story. This is your son.
Mm-hmm.
At what point after his death and after the transplants were made did you decide to become so active in the California Transplant Donor Network?
Well, I'll be honest, the first few months was really hard for me. I was trying to, in my mind, to logically think, why? With so many murderers and child molesters and criminals in this world, why take the good ones? And I didn't understand it. I was very angry. But then I got a letter from the donor network that said he saved 5 people's lives. I've been through a lot in my life, and I can honestly say that changed it for me. I can't explain it, but when when a guy 43 years old who was my age at the time, is alive because of my son. All my children are grown. There was just something inside of me that says, Brian loved California. He died out here. He saved lives out here. I need to come out here and be a part of this. So like 6 months later, I was here. And within another 4 or 5 months, I started volunteering with the donor network to make a difference and help educate. And it helped give me closure. I think we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. And I think my personality is so strong that I couldn't see doing anything else but using his story to help save more lives.
You have your tag on here. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I can remember who I'm talking to.
Okay. Here, I'll give you my card too.
Thanks. So I'll read off here because we just met just before the show.
Yes, we
did. I have to say, sometimes we have guests lined up, and tonight I believe that we had 3 or 4 other people besides you.
Yes, I was thrown cold turkey into this.
And here you are.
Like, oh my gosh.
You're carrying the Olympic torch for the California Transplant Donor Network all by yourself.
Well, to do my boss proud, I just want to state that the organs that you can donate are your kidneys, pancreas, your heart, your liver, your lungs, and your small intestines.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And those save lives. So to enhance lives, you have like your heart valves and skin and cornea and ligaments and bones and stuff like that. So a lot of people don't realize the people who tear their ACLs, that's donated. That's from a donor. And there's a lot of,
What's an ACL? Is it in
it's
your
like your
knee?
it's your main muscle that holds your
So you can donate
Yeah.
muscles too?
like tendons and
Oh, wow.
nerves and bones and skin and stuff.
That's amazing.
And see, what people don't realize is they think, okay, well, I'm 60 years old, or they don't want my organs, but older skin is more elastic. So if you take someone who's
That's
sick,
not what we've heard.
but it's true. So if you take the skin, which is always in the back where people can't see, my son had an open casket and you couldn't even tell he was a donor. And you take it and you burn it, put it on a burnt child. It allows their skin to grow more natural underneath,
Oh, really?
like a human Band-Aid, and they don't scar as bad. And so there's a lot of little details. So I tell people, if you want to go to our website, ctdn.org or donatelife.org, it gives you more specifics on the exact things that can be donated. And another thing is, people would think, oh, well, I've had cancer, or I have, Hep C or something. Technology changes just like everything else in the medical field. So now if I had Hep C and you have Hep C, and I'm a match for you with your tissue size, your blood type, and your organ size, then you're going to take my heart because I'm not giving you something you don't already have. And there are certain cancers that if you've been in remission for 10 years or more, you can be a donor. So there are still certain illnesses that you cannot be a donor. I know if you have been exposed to mad cow disease, you can't be a tissue donor, but you can be an organ donor.
Interesting.
So I tell people, if it's something you want to do and you're passionate about it, register. Then if you're able to, at your time of death, let a doctor determine what can, maybe they can't give your heart to somebody, but maybe your liver or your cornea. Or, I read a story about a guy who lost his vision in an industrial accident. Young, married, wife pregnant, lost his sight. 30-something years later, he got a cornea transplant, seen his kids and grandkids for the first time in his life, and looked at his wife and said, "You're more beautiful than I remember." But that's the little technical thing that doesn't save your life, but it enhances your life. So every little bit, it makes a difference in somebody's world, and people just have no clue because they're not educated.
If someone is out there watching this program and is a recipient from a transplant and they would like to become involved in the organization, how do they do that? I'm going to hold up your son's picture one
just
more time
contact
here.
us at ctn.org.
See if I can get it
And
straight.
you go through a small training session and you become an ambassador, and then we go to events, we go to speaking engagements, we do a lot of things that is not just out in the public, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking in front of people, but they can give in different ways to give back, tell their story. It's really good to hear a donor side and a recipient side, because it makes it real. It makes it like, wow, this happened to your son? Wow, he could have been my son, or he could have been me. It really hits home.
Give us your son's name one more time.
Sergeant Brian John McLaren.
Thank you very
Oh,
much
thank you
for
so
joining
much.
us this evening.
On Veterans Day, it means even more, because
Thank
he
you.
loved being in the military, and he loved life, and I'm glad he was able to save lives.
Thank you.
Oh, it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you very
You
much.
too.